Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's prediction videos for Season 3 of The Leftovers. In this video, I will take a look back at the first two seasons of The Leftovers in order to try to predict what may happen in Season 3, as well as talk about some promotional material released for Season 3 and what I think this may mean for the show. So I have to start off by giving a spoiler warning for The Leftovers up to the end of Season 2, and also a spoiler warning for the trailers and promos for Season 3, as well as the official plot descriptions released for most episodes of Season 3. So if you don't want to know anything about what's going to happen in Season 3 before watching it, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So in preparation for this video, I recently rewatched the first two seasons of The Leftovers and was reminded how amazing this show was, particularly with Season 2. In a recent video I did where I named my top 10 favorite seasons from any TV show, Season 2 of The Leftovers was number 4 on my list, but after rewatching it, I felt it should have been number 3 or number 2 or possibly even number 1. This is simply an amazing year of TV featuring some of the best storytelling ever put to screen. However, I'm not here to give my opinion on what I thought of the first two seasons of The Leftovers, as I already have 2 videos out where I do that. Instead, I'm going to ask the question about how Season 3 will go down, which after seeing how amazing Season 2 was, it seems like a difficult task to try to top it or even to maintain that same level of quality. Now, with Season 1, showrunner Damon Lindelof talked about when they were making it, they weren't at all thinking about the possibility of future seasons and were entirely focused on just making Season 1. And after it was finished, HBO offered them the possibility to do a Season 2, and they explained that it wasn't originally their intention to do another season, as Season 1 completely covers the events of the novel it was based on. As Season 1, at the end, ends at the same point that the novel ends. But Lindelof and co-showrunner Tom Perrotta, who wrote the novel the show is based on, decided to go ahead and do a Season 2. As Lindelof explained, that it's not very often in television that you get offered to do another season, so he felt it would be wasteful to not take advantage of this opportunity and do a second season. Tom Perrotta apparently relied a lot on Lindelof's experience in television in creating a second season, as he had never planned to do a second book, and so described the creation of Season 2 as a collaborative effort between himself and Lindelof, which was quite different from Season 1, which was an adaptation. Season 2 was released and gained critical success and received glowing and positive reviews, many critics agreeing with me that it was one of the best seasons of TV ever released, and also a strong fan following. However, its overall ratings were still quite low. Lindelof once even jokingly said that no one is watching our show, so had this been on a network television channel or a basic cable channel, it surely would have been canceled. But thankfully it was on HBO, which is a subscription network, therefore not as affected by individual ratings, and instead strive to create an overall channel viewers would want to subscribe to. Therefore, it's more at liberty to continue shows with strong critical reviews and a devoted fan base, regardless of the ratings, rather than more so than network television would be. A prior example of this would be the much revered HBO show The Wire, which despite its incredibly low ratings ran for 5 seasons, as similarly it had a glowing critical reviews and a strong fan base. So when the question came up on whether or not The Leftovers would be renewed for a third season, it wasn't a sure thing. In fact, around the time the show would typically be renewed, fans staged a demonstration outside the HBO offices, dressed all in white as the Guilty Remnant, with their cigarettes and with signs similar to the pads the Guilty Remnant used to communicate with in the show that simply read "Renew." So HBO did indeed renew The Leftovers for a third season, and the showrunners stated that they wanted this next season to be the final season. Apparently, HBO urged Lindelof to keep the possibility of a season 4 open, but he declined, stating that it was the right time to end the show. Looking back on both Season 1 and Season 2, you can see that both seasons ended in a way that could have served as an ending for the entire series, but at the same time left the possibility open for another season. So there's been many different opinions on when the show should end, as some are unhappy with the announcement that Season 3 is going to be the final season and would love to see it continue, while others are upset that there is even going to be a Season 3, thinking that Season 2 was the perfect place to end the show. Now, me personally, I disagree with both of these sentiments and trust the showrunners that Season 3 is the right place to end it. Basically, with how amazing Season 2 was, the showrunners have earned my trust, and if they feel that Season 3 is the right place to end it, then I'll take them at their word. I would hate for this show to outstay its welcome and be on just for the sake of being on, like some shows like Dexter and 24 has done in the past. On the other hand, I'm very glad we are getting a Season 3, and it would have been very disappointing had the show ended after Season 2. Because although I can see how this could make a good ending for the series if need be, as the show has always at its core been about a character story about Kevin Garvey and his need to have his family whole again. And Season 2 ends with his family, including his son and daughter, ex-wife, current lover, and her brother and his wife, along with their adopted child, all being there to greet him. So in a sense, the story is completed there, but I do still feel there are a lot of loose threads that I would like to see followed up on. Which is why I said I feel that the ending of Season 2 was created to be a possible ending for the series, but leaves the possibility open for more stories to be told. But I'm hoping for a bit more finality to the ending of Season 3. That's not to say I expect many of the show's mysteries to be resolved, as in fact I personally don't feel the show has any mysteries to resolve, as it was stated by the showrunners from the very beginning that the reasons on why and how the departure occurred would never be answered, and that the show is more about how these unexplained events affect the characters in the show. However, there are many storylines that can be expanded upon and followed up on. For example, throughout Season 2, the show dropped hints about a man in Australia who claimed he came back from the dead and no longer can die, and as well as Kevin's father moving to Australia, and other hints Australia is important to the overall story somehow. So it did seem to me that the writers were purposely dropping hints to set up a Season 3 storyline involving Australia. Although had the show ended at Season 2, these could have been dismissed as meaningless. But more than that, I want to see what happens next for the characters, as it is, and the entire 2 seasons of the show runs, we've waited for Kevin to be reunited with his estranged son Tommy. Now that that has finally happened, I'd like to see how the two of them interact. Also, are Kevin and Nora able to reconcile their differences, and will Jill be able to forgive her mother for abandoning her? And also, in Season 2, we were introduced to a whole other family, the Murphys, and it ended with their entire family in turmoil, so will John be able to save his family in the same way that Kevin did? So in the end, I'm glad we're getting a Season 3, but I trust that it will end in a way that is satisfying to close off the show, but I'm not expecting any big answers as to the departure, because that's not really what the show is about. So, how to predict Season 3? That's a bit difficult, as the mantra of the show seems to be expect the unexpected. Season 2 completely departed from Season 1 in many ways. It makes trying to predict Season 3 a near impossible task. However, thankfully, we have the trailers and the descriptions that HBO released to guide us. So in my Season 2 reviews, I predicted that Season 3, they would go to Australia, and a while back I heard that they were indeed filming in Australia for Season 3, so I did indeed get this prediction right. However, they also filmed parts of Season 3 in Texas, And judging by the trailers, a lot of the show will take place in Jarden as well. And I just want to mention real quick how awesome it is that the show actually goes to the locations where it takes place. Like in season 1, it takes place in New York, so it was filmed in New York. Season 2 takes place in Texas, so it was filmed in Texas. And for season 3, it would have been so easy to film, scenes in Texas and say it's Australia, but instead they actually go to Australia to film. And I really like that, as most shows wouldn't do that. That means that the supporting characters and extras in Australia will actually most likely be Australians and not just Americans faking Australian accents, and I like that. So I was going to speculate on who's going to Australia and when, and what will the first episode be like. Will it be a standalone focusing on new characters like the premiere of season 2 was? But I actually don't need to speculate, as the official descriptions released for each episode kind of gives this away. So I'm going to read each of those and give my predictions for each episode, starting with episode 1, which is called The Book of Kevin. The description reads, 3 years after Miracle, Texas was overrun by the guilty remnant, Kevin Garvey has returned to his role as chief of police, although he seems to have moved past the incredible events surrounding his resurrection. The 7th anniversary of the sudden departure is just 2 weeks away, and many believe another apocalyptic event may come with it. So first off, this does confirm what I suspected from the trailers, that there will be a 3-year time jump, which is pretty interesting. And Kevin takes up his role as chief of police, but he and his family are still in Jarden, which is really interesting. I wonder how Jarden has been reshaped since the events of season 2. We also see in the trailer Tommy wearing a police uniform, so it seems he and Kevin have indeed reformed their relationship, and he went as far to follow in his footsteps, as it were. But as for my thoughts on how the season will start, if we will get a weird cave woman type scene like we did in season 2, I kind of doubt it, but who knows. But I do think it is possible the episode will begin following directly after the events of season 2, and then we'll get a time jump 3 years in the future. Or perhaps it will begin after the time jump, but then later on we'll get some flashbacks to right after the events of season 2. I'm not certain, but I still think it's possible, as there's a lot about what happened between the time jump that I'd like to see. For example, in the trailer, we see Eevee and Make still together, looking like they, did at the end of season 2. And I'm not sure if this is a scene before or after the time jump. If it is, then it means they're still together in after the time jump, and frankly I'm at a loss on how they will fit into this season. And of course I'm curious to see a follow-up on the Murphys. We see in the trailer John talking to Kevin, and also Erica talking to Nora, and some shots of their son, and I mentioned Eevee already, but we don't really see them together, so whatever became of their family is still up in the air. So I'm curious to see some follow-up on that. But judging by the description, it does seem like episode 1 will set up for the big storyline this season, which seems to be everyone thinking that the world will come to an end on the 7th anniversary of the departure. Why exactly they're all convinced of this, I'm not sure, but I think it will be explained, or at least touched on, in this episode. Episode 2 is called Don't Be Ridiculous, and the synopsis reads, in her official capacity as a fraud investigator for the Department of Sudden Departure, Nora travels to St. Louis to investigate a possible scam that involves convincing the family members of the departed there's a way to see their loved ones again. So this was touched on in the trailer that ends with Nora getting a call with someone asking her if she'd like to see her loved ones again. I have a feeling that Nora will get this call first, and that's what will prompt her to investigate. This also appears to be a Nora-centric episode. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the majority of it just follows her in St. Louis and doesn't really feature many of the other main characters, and will be kind of like her episode in season 1, Guest, in that regard, and what she finds there will somehow tie into the main storyline. Episode 3 is called Crazy White Fellow Thinking, and the synopsis reads, With the clock ticking towards the anniversary of the departure and emboldened by a vision that is either divine prophecy or other insanity, Kevin Garvey Sr. wanders the Australian outback in an effort to save the world from the apocalypse. Now, this I think will be a standalone Kevin Garvey Sr. episode that will focus entirely on him and not have any other characters in this, any other main characters. This will more set the stage for the end of the world scenario and how Kevin Sr. thinks he can stop it. And it's likely he will ask for his son's help, which is why he comes to Australia, as in the trailer we see him tell him, "If I could do this, I would." It will be interesting to see the two of them interact after season 2, as Kevin will most likely totally believe his father after his experiences in the afterlife. However, that's for later. In this episode, it will be just about Kevin Sr., which will be interesting because he hasn't had a standalone episode yet. Episode 4 is titled Gday Melbourne, and the synopsis reads, Kevin and Nora travel to Australia, where she continues to track down the masterminds of an elaborate con, while he catches a glimpse of an unexpected face from the past, forcing him to confront the traumatic events of 3 years earlier. Okay, this is interesting because it implies Kevin doesn't go to Australia at his father's invitation, but rather he goes with Nora, who's following up on this investigation. And this familiar face he runs into undoubtedly is the dude he met in the afterlife, who was infamous for claiming he could come back from the dead. But since Kevin did the same thing, it's likely that Kevin will believe him. So what's interesting to note is in season 2, it was said that Kevin Sr. was going to Perth, whereas in this episode, it seems Kevin and Nora go to Melbourne. And if you know anything about Australian geography, that's basically the other side of the country. But that's assuming Kevin Sr. is still near the Perth area, which I think he is. So I think that Kevin doesn't intend to see his father, but something will happen in this episode to change his mind, and that they will go to Perth at the end. Episode 5 is It's a Matt World. The synopsis reads, convinced it is Kevin's destiny to be in Miracle for the coming 7th anniversary of the departure, Matt Jamieson impulsively heads to Australia in an effort to bring Kevin home. Unfortunately, God gets in his way. So this seems to me that Kevin has indeed decided to stay in Australia longer than he intended, which is what's got Matt all freaked out. As we see from the trailer, Matt will take the news of Kevin coming back to life as a sign that Kevin is some sort of savior figure. That, coupled with the belief that Miracle is special, will compel him to believe Kevin is needed there in order to save the world. So I think this episode is going to be yet another rehash of Matt's season 1 episode that they seem to want to repeat every year, of Matt going on some crazy adventure with stuff getting in his way. I just hope that they pull this one better off than they did last year's. Episode 6 is Certified, and the synopsis reads, Laurie Garvey, a former therapist, must become one again as she heads to Australia to help Nora and Kevin along in their paths. So I'm not sure what this is going to be about, but we did get some clips in the trailer of Laurie talking to Nora, so it seems like they are on friendly terms. And although it's clear that Kevin and Nora are still together, I get the feeling that Laurie stayed in Miracle over the time jump to be with her family. So I'm hoping in this episode we'll get a little about what's going on in Jarden before she leaves to Australia, and what effect she'll have on the Australian storyline is beyond me. Episode 7 is called The Most Powerful Man in the World and His Identical Twin Brother. And the synopsis reads, on a mission of mercy, Kevin assumes an alternate identity. Okay, so this is really vague, but if I were to guess, I'd say this has something to do with Kevin's trip in the afterlife. As in the trailer, we see Kevin Sr. dunk Kevin underwater, with strong implications that Kevin is dying so he can have another afterlife experience, and this will no doubt have something to do with them trying to save the world, which is why I think Kevin Sr. says if I could do this myself, I would, because he wants to save the world, and he knows that they need to save the world, but Kevin is the only one who can do it. But that's just my guess, and maybe instead of being an international assassin, his afterlife experience will involve him like having a twin brother, taking on an alternate identity. Of course, taking on alternate identities is what Kevin does in the afterlife, so that's what has me to believe this will be another international assassin type episode, but that's just a wild guess. So there isn't a title synopsis for episode 8, but we do know that episode 8 will be the series finale, the final episode, as there will only be 8 episodes in season 3, so I'm not too surprised that they didn't want to give anything about this episode away. So in an interview with Damon Lindelof, he talked about how season 3 will be very different in tone from the previous 2 seasons, which doesn't surprise me seeing how different season 2 was from season 1, but he appeared to be implying that season 3 would be a bit more adventure based, as it seems they will be on a mission to save the world. So I wonder why they take this threat that the world is ending seriously, and I hope that explanation to this is satisfying. So it appears from the episode descriptions that it will be just Kevin, Nora, Matt, and Laurie going to Australia to, of course, meet up with Kevin Sr. So characters like Tommy, Jill, and the Murphys will remain in Jarden, and I hope that they do have something to do there in the later half of the season and don't just appear in the first couple of episodes, but we'll see. We do know that Jill stays behind, as in the trailer we see her saying goodbye to Kevin and joking about how the world will end. So it seems at this stage she's not taking this threat seriously, but it appears something will happen to make at least Kevin take it seriously. So overall, I'm really excited for season 3, and my ultimate prediction for season 3 is that it will be awesome. Now, whether it will fail to live up to season 2's greatness or surpass it, I can't say, but based on what we see here, it looks really hopeful, and I'm really excited for this season. So that's it for my predictions for season 3 of The Leftovers. If you haven't already, you can check out the reviews I did for The Leftovers season 1 and 2, and be sure to check back here every week as I review every episode of season 3 of The Leftovers, and also be sure to check out my channel for many more videos on other shows like Game of Thrones, Star Trek, The Expanse, 100, Better Call Saul, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.